Hello, my name is Stephen Kilger and I'm the managing editor of Feed and Grain magazine and the host of the Feed and Grain podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today as we dive deep into the issues affecting the feed manufacturing, grain handling, and allied industries. Today's episode is brought to you by the Bin Whip from Pneumat Systems. The powerful dual impact Bin Whip removes the toughest buildup and blockages in industrial storage silos without hazardous silo entry. Learn more today at binwhip.com. Today's podcast has two guests, Jake Jornstedt, co-founder and CEO at Bushel, and Tony Morsini, Bushel's new Chief Digital Payments Officer. We're talking about the advantages of implementing a digital payment system at your facility, how it addresses the security and other issues surrounding paper checks, and the uptick in digital payments in the industry. I hope you enjoy the interview. If you want to help out with the podcast and are listening to this in a podcasting app, please rate us and subscribe. If you're listening online, sign up for the Feed and Grain newsletter Industry Watch to see what new podcasts drop and stay up to date with all the news from around the industry. Now, on to the show. Hi, Jake. Hi, Tony. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Stephen.
Oh, you're here because, Tony, you were hired at Bushel not too long ago. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background in digital payments and what kind of drew you to the agriculture section?
Yeah, sure, Stephen. So my name's Tony Morsini. I'm Chief Digital Payments Officer at Bushel. I've been here now, I think August 5th was my first day at work. So I'm like 2.5 months in. I've spent about 20 years in payments. I used to own a consulting company and I ended up getting Visa as a client. And I went there and I loved it and I became an employee. And I ended up at Visa for 10 years in product. I was always in product there, working on different Visa product types like dispute products and commercial card issuer processing, and kind of got the startup itch. And I had a friend who had just started a company called SoFi, and I was the original head of product. And I stayed there for 5 years, and I launched a pretty successful program there called SoFi Money, which is basically was a large challenger bank product that I think today it has like 2 million customers on it. And so that was great because I then had network experience from Visa. And then I had issuer experience, being a real issuer, a card issuer at SoFi. And then I went to Figure with a bunch of the ex-SoFi people. I stayed there a few years. I created an issuer processing platform built on blockchain that I stayed there about 4 years and we sold that business. And then before I worked at Bushel, I was at a really cool merchant gateway provider for the oil and gas industry. This is where a lot of my ideas for Bushel kind of came from. It was a pretty focused business out of Houston that provided merchant acquiring for mobile transactions for the oil and gas industry. When I was working there, I met Jake and he and I talked about this for months and it got me pretty excited about it. And so I joined Bushel.
Well, number one, welcome to agriculture. We're happy to have you. Jake, well, you've been on before and we've talked before, but can you give us a little background?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Jake Jornstedt, co-founder and CEO here at Bushel. My co-founder, Ryan Ragus, and I have been building software specifically in agriculture since 2017 with our offering. I'm a technology guy with that background, but family on both sides of my world are in agriculture, both in cattle and in row crops up here. I grew up in northern North Dakota, about 10 miles from the Manitoba border. Man, if Tony's background doesn't tell you that we're pretty serious about solving these payments problems in ag, I don't know what is. And if you think we're crazy on titles, Chief Digital Payments Officer, it really just, if you say it's CDPO, it just sounds like C3PO. So that's why we went with that. So that's the whole reason for that title. But Tony knows what he's doing in this space. And frankly, the opportunity is absolutely massive to change how we think about money movement in agriculture. And it's starting to change, but there is a heck of a lot of work left.
You guys just released your report on kind of digital payments in agriculture. What did you guys find out? 70% of grain settlements are still being paid by paper check?
At least.
As a millennial in a digital age, that's still kind of crazy. We're so far behind. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are thinking are the solutions to that, whether it's ACH payments or digital wallets?
So first off, I want to dispel some myths because, and I hope everyone that's listening kind of hears this. First off, for some reason, we still hear people think that we are somehow building some sort of crypto blockchain payments tool for ag. That is not the case. We're working with traditional bank tools, but moving agriculture into the 21st century of banking, which includes ACH and, moving away from wires, moving away from drafts and paper checks. And the other myth is that this is all about real-time payments. And our customer, the agribusiness, whether they're a co-op, a grain elevator, or a retailer, they're worried about float. That makes sense. It's not great to hear as a farmer, but the truth is that paper checks take 7 days or more to get deposited. And in that time, somebody might be earning interest on that money while you as a farmer take too long to get it deposited. And so we aren't trying to necessarily break all of these sort of models, but at the same time, the idea that a farmer would be inconvenienced every single week and month, especially during harvest, to have to go to town and deposit a paper check at the bank, and on top of the fact that they may have a lien, which adds another complication to the problem, is absolutely ridiculous. And we went this fall and launched, basically we call it direct deposit for our customers. So this is a grain elevator that's paying farmers, or a processor, an ethanol plant or mill that owes farmers and their businesses money for their grain, can enable this where the farmer just clicks the drop down and gets set up with direct deposit all on the tool, on the mobile app or on the web. Whereas traditionally, as you know, you've probably seen this before, you fill out a paper form, put a voided check in the mail, and you send all of your account information in the mail to somebody. That's how you get set up today, prior to Bushel's work in direct deposit. But the last time that I got a paper check for my payroll was like never. So there's a lot of work to be done. We're making it super easy for our customers to do that. But in the process, Stephen, we have companies that we work with that don't even have an ACH processing ability, have never offered ACH payments before. And that's only one part of the equation. That's to pay the farmer, but also to get paid electronically is also a challenge as a retailer for fertilizer, seed, chemical, and whatever else. So tons of problems. I think we're making progress, and it's not some dark art, black magic we're working on here.
Stephen, like one of the things that's really interesting, I've worked with a ton of banks in like a partnership capacity over these past 20 years in payments. And, you watch advertisements for commercial bank accounts and things, right? There's always the communication in the marketing that, hey, we know your business. And that's how they pitch these commercial products is, we know your business, we're here for you. And I think at the banker level, that's totally true. Like I think the banker you meet in any kind of commercial account set up, like for a farmer, they do know your business. But does that really then manifest itself in the products? And if you look at really the products that are offered, while they have that knowledge on the people side, when you look at the products are just these more or less relatively generic, like core banking and payment services that they buy from just a couple big companies that are largely all the same. And so when you asked me in the first part, like what really excited me about, I think one of the things that really excited me was like, I couldn't believe no one had done this already. But my experience working with banks a lot is you have to get to a pretty chunky size bank before they really have software engineers on staff. Like most banks, they're just buying these off the shelf products from a few companies, and they don't really have software engineers until you get, like I've worked with some like up around 5 billion in assets before you start to see that there's someone there who can actually deliver something that isn't just generic functionality. So I think that's one of the opportunities I saw here was like, here's a huge industry that gets really no love from banking tech, and banking tech hasn't delivered anything to the banks that really solve this vertical's problems.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I really didn't think about. Because even if your local Farm Bureau bank person knows you really well and they know the industry, who they work for, that's a giant conglomerate. Probably has really other pressing concerns, and it's usually not agriculture.
And to introduce more problems, go try to digitally figure out where you stand on all of your loans in agriculture. All of us are used to seeing our credit card balances and our loan balances from our mortgages from our banks. But to understand that in one place as a farmer, as well as being able to somehow see your operating line from Farm Credit and maybe your loan from Farmer Mac for your land, it's just not even possible right now. It takes you forever to understand. And most of it's just a paper invoice. Here's your latest mortgages due and here's your balance. And so that too has not been solved. And there's a ton of opportunity to work with the Farm Credit system and everyone else involved to kind of make this whole thing easier for everyone.
Yeah, and finances are a struggle, even at the best of times. So making it as easy as possible to get your information and know what's happening with all your loans and accounts seems really important. As a normal person who doesn't have a small business, like I need that. There's kind of the question about security. You hear about digital fraud and stuff because that's what everyone's doing, but there's actually a lot of security concerns with mail payments. And how can digital payments hopefully help ease some of those problems? Because sending checks to the mail is never the most secure way of doing things.
Checks are pretty unsecure in general. At the bottom of the check is that routing number and account number, which is like a private key printed on a piece of paper, is really what that is, right? It's not secure. They do those polls for your gym membership. What that is that's the manager at the gym uploading a spreadsheet in their bank portal of routing number and account numbers. And they say, pull $50 this month from Steven's account, pull 45 from Tony's account, and they upload that into their commercial banking application. But that data is, probably in a spreadsheet. In these situations, you have someone learns of a bunch of routing numbers and account numbers, they can pretty much add whatever they want to that, and the polls will go through and they could take the money before anyone knows about it. And those kind of things happen. That kind of fraud happens. There's people with bad intentions everywhere. And so the check is inherently like insecure, honestly, because of it's exposing a private key to the world, basically.
Stephen, another problem, the ag retailer, if you're a grain elevator and an ag retailer as well, the idea of being able to take payment for a fertilizer purchase of $20,000 and it's on a credit card negates the entire point of selling the product because you're paying 3.5% on the transaction. It's not a feasible path forward in ag. And so there needs to be another alternative method of payment besides the paper check and the credit card to make that happen.
That's a really good point because a lot of this, you could look at it as kind of an advantage towards the farmer, right? Like digitizing payments, getting them their money faster. But it's also a big benefit to grain elevators, fertilizer plants, these businesses that having a check writing system I'm guessing isn't cheap. It's also hard to keep track of. And also, like you said, if you do it through credit card, then you're open to fees. Just seems like there's a lot of problems for people at every level of this that digital payments could help solve.
If you assume that you have no fraud on an annual basis for paper checks, a paper check transaction costs between $10 and $25 every time. That's before any other problems. So clearly there's a better way.
Yeah, and agriculture gets a lot of slack for being behind on technology. And admittedly, they are kind of slowed in the uptake with some things, but this seems like we're really, really far behind. Agriculture is also kind of like this weird amalgamation of personal and business relationships all being intertwined. And the guy that your banker, and you've known him for 25 years and you've always gone through him, your local grain elevator, that even if the one down the street has flashy new stuff, you tend to stick with the one you know. How can digital payments enhance and simplify these business interactions?
If you're from Silicon Valley, you think that you could just jump into this space, disrupt everything, and none of those things matter. But the reality is we have physical product and physical location that matters more than almost any other industry. You cannot deliver grain 2 states away in any practical sense outside of a railroad, right? And so like the idea that there's some sort of untapped market here or whatever, these guys know their relationships. But on the flip side, in our State of the Farm report, it's proven this. These farmers are using digital wallets in their everyday life. And the only place they're not using sort of digital payment methods or sort of transactions online is in agriculture. That is clearly the pattern that's happening.
And you guys, you've done that. I've noticed most of your interactions with, it tends to be bringing businesses in, right? Bringing co-ops, bringing other software companies in on your system, and that therefore being able to kind of branch out that way rather than targeting individual producers.
That's how we've come to market for the last 5 years. That continues to be our focus in terms of the customer, right? The agribusiness is our core customer. We're here to make their business more efficient and more effective. If in the end it benefits the farmer as well, that's a double win for us. In 25, you're going to see some more capabilities. We're really on both sides, the agribusiness, but also you're going to see some things from us on the farmer that will make more sense for the farmer to encourage their agribusinesses to use these tools because their benefits are going to continue to go up. And in the end, if you can make more interest on your cash sitting in your account today rather than a week from now or maybe never, a lot of farmers, for example, don't get paid more than maybe half a point of interest on money sitting in their checking account. We're going to change that in 25. And I think that's going to matter a lot for these guys. Small margins right now are all we have to work with. And so if we can help them all make more money in the process, I think it's going to change the way people think about this.
Well, you mentioned earlier, a week for a check to be deposited is a week you're not getting interest.
Right.
And yeah, that probably doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people, but when you're getting
Getting
hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments.
A week's 2% of a year, right? And so you have a lot of those 2% a year, it all adds up, right?
But it is getting better. Your State of the Farm report showed that 12% in paper check payments. Do you see that as a trend? Do you think it's going to snowball is, I think, a big question? Because to me, it seems like a perfect opportunity for, in 5 years, for us to be almost at 100%.
Well, our job is to make it snowball. That's what our top priority is, right? At Bushel. And then, what else is crazy is the volume, even our own system, we're seeing basically a 300% increase this year in money moved on the platform over last. And so we're starting to really see that is starting to snowball. And what's interesting about the information is when somebody starts to do it this way, they don't really go back. It's not like, oh, it was an inconvenience and then they just went back to paper checks. It was just easier. That is not what's happening. And so once somebody's there, I don't think they're going back to that old method and a paper check or whatever it might be. And so I think snowball effect's coming. It's going to be rolling downhill and it's going to be rolling fast.
I think, Stephen, like you mentioned, this has been a long time coming. It's kind of, I think, like it goes back to our original conversation. I don't think anyone's made the product for the industry. No one's focused on this. When you start delivering product that solves problems within a vertical industry in payments, like for example, like when you make a payment method can either be your cash balance or your line of credit, and it's one click difference, and you can make spending that money super easy as opposed to having a checkbook in the mail for that line of credit and you have to go find it in your desk drawer and all that, when it's really all integrated in. So the farm credit system, lender's line of credit looks just like another bucket of money that you can pull from in one button. Or when you have a bill pay system, but it's a bill pay system that is pre-populated with common ag industry payees. All these little features just incrementally make it more and more powerful. Every one of them solves another problem and reduces friction. And so that's what we're going to roll out is that, right? And I think it will snowball. I mean, that's what we're betting on. And people will see the value. So people have got to see the value in your product, right? It's got to solve their problems. It's got to have better economics. It's got to overcome the friction of changing. And so to do that, it has to be a lot better than what they have today. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as more co-ops and companies also adopt your system, it is a selling point. We talked a little bit about people have loyalty, but loyalty only goes so far. And if a co-op can demonstrate that it is making this easier for the producer compared to its neighbor, then yeah, it probably will attract some customers over.
We know it does, Stephen. The customers are saying, I work with this company because they pay me online and they pay me on time. And that's why I've switched to doing business with them, because if they're in the same market, there's not necessarily a difference in price unless there may be a processor or something like that we're seeing that already.
I would imagine, because it is. I mean, at the end of the day, this is business. And the easier you can make it for your customer, then the better.
It's not complicated. Here's one thing that's interesting in ag. Our customer at Bushel has explained to us so many times that part of their challenge is this lien position that a lender may have with the farmer. And they're liable to some extent to paying the farmer correctly, especially if there's a lien. They may have to have two names on the paper check, one the lender and one the farmer. And their job is to check the state registries and everywhere else to make sure that farmer doesn't have loans they're not aware of. That's a problem. We've been working on this for a while. We've realized now about somewhere between 30 and 50% of the industry payments would have a lien on them at any given time. So that means there hasn't been an electronic payment solution for liens. And so we've been working hard on this. We filed our first patent this year on electronic payments in agriculture with liens. And on top of the idea of us filing the patent, in the process, we found that nobody has filed patents in this arena. And frankly, nobody's even thought about this problem before. And so, of course, to Tony's point, nobody's done this before.
And that's exciting. And you guys do have some exciting stuff coming up. Can you give us a little preview on? And you're going to have to come back on once these systems launch to a broader audience.
The first major change for us in 25, talk about this more in January, but our customers are going to start earning interest in all their money in our accounts with our bank partner. They're not Bushel, right? It's not a Bushel account. It's an FDIC insured bank account. They'll be able to have significantly higher FDIC insurance limits, and they'll be paid really competitive rates on their interest on a liquid checking account. It's not a money market. It's not a CD tying your money up for 6 months. It is liquid. And so that's a big change. And then you'll see in Q2 next year, a lot of updates coming for the farmer to make their reasons to use a tool like this significantly higher. I don't know, Tony, you want to share any more?
We really looked at make the farmer switch from a paper check-based world. What do we have to have? So we put together a roadmap of features that'll be coming out next year. And like Jake said, the first thing will be higher limits, higher interest rates than we think they're going to get anywhere else. We're going to do things like we've heard that the problem with mobile check deposits has been the limit, like their local bank. If they do have it, then they've got some tiny limit of $10,000 or something. And that doesn't work in this space where they were getting big checks of $100,000. So we're going to address that. We're going to have debit card on the product. They'll be able to either spend their cash balance with us, or they'll be able to hit a third-party line of credit. And we're building that as well. And so a bunch of features, like I mentioned earlier, a bill pay that's kind of ag-centric. We think this is going to be pretty compelling product financially that was really built for the American farmer, honestly.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like it's going to be an exciting 2025. Tony, is there anything that's kind of surprised you about just working in ag in the payments landscape?
Honestly, no. Jake and I talked for a couple months before I joined. And so I done my research. The lack of anything very compelling from a product standpoint, the lack of any one major bank really dominating in this space. Those were all things I kind of figured out on my own. And it just sort of reinforced my belief that there was a huge opportunity here. There's a couple of businesses that have sort of done this, that have focused payments on a vertical and have done extremely well. Like one of them is, WEX and FleetCor, those two, which focused on truck drivers, over-the-road truckers, 18-wheeler drivers, and developed payment networks at those fuel stations, that those big gas stations that truckers go to. They focused on a payment network for that and then expanded into other services for that industry, like factoring and currency exchange for truckers that drive across borders a lot, like in South America and Europe. And so as I looked at this, I was like, this is really reminds me of those other businesses. Yet this one, no one has touched this yet, really, at all. That was pretty exciting. And like I said, Steve, I came into this with my eyes pretty wide open. So
that doesn't surprise me. You're in finance, not in English. With me, I'd be take the job, no research done. It's fine. I'll figure it out. You probably did all your research. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you come back soon, and I hope that you have a great rest of your year.
I hope everybody that's working hard to finish out harvest this year, whether you're buying grain or farmer yourself, good luck finishing harvest in 2024. And 2025 is going to be hopefully an exciting year, and hopefully we can see some better prices next year. Let's hope for it.
Yeah, and hopefully next year you're getting those checks digitally.
You're darn right. By next fall, that better be happening.
All right. Thank you, guys. And to everyone out there listening, stay safe.